Welcome to the Natural Health Show with one of New England's leading natural health care specialists, Mark Mincola. Call Mark at 781-837-4900 on 95.9 WATD. He's waiting to hear from you.
Welcome home, Natural Health Nation. I welcome you one and all to your one safe haven from all of life's negative side effects. Great to have you with us. Come on in, take a breath of fresh air from the world so filled with stress, over-medicated, overstressed, and undernourished. And it's great to have you on board. Hey, you know, there's some stories in the news that just never seem to go away, like a bad habit. They just won't quit. And once again, it is back in the news, according to an article in the Baltimore Sun on August 17th, just a couple short days ago, by Meredith Cohen. The article goes on. Six Queen Anne's County residents have been diagnosed with a strain of swine flu that has been infecting people across the country, including many who've been attending state and local agricultural fairs, according to state health officials. There have been 224 cases identified nationally by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and state agricultural officials confirmed that the 5 children and 1 adult in Maryland from different families all came in contact with pigs at the Queen Anne's County Fair, as well as other locations. Officials say only rarely has the virus been transmitted from person to person. And this follows an August 10th report from the Center for Disease Control that announced 153 cases of swine flu have been reported since July 12th. So over basically 1 month. The average monthly total is usually about 24, and it just jumped up to 153. There are 9 states to date that have reported incidences of swine flu. And in case you forgot, let's flash back to 2009 when this started to really fly off the handle. We were frightened to death. All of us were back in 2009. This is a report from Dr. Margaret Chan, who is the then Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO. Ladies and gentlemen, in April, WHO announced the emergence of a novel influenza A virus. This particular H1N1 strain has not circulated previously in humans. This virus is entirely new. The virus is contagious, spreading easily from one person to another, from one country to another. And as of today, nearly 30,000 confirmed cases have been reported in 74 countries. This is, again, June 11th of 2009. And there was great surveillance, of course, at that time. But this is really the key to this particular piece. Human-to-human spreading in several countries can no longer be traced to clearly defined chains of human-to-human transmission. Further spread is considered inevitable. I have confirmed with leading influenza experts, virologists, and public health officials. In line with procedures set out in international health regulations, I have sought guidance and advice from the emergency committee established for this purpose. On the basis of available evidence and these expert assessments of the evidence, the scientific criteria for an influenza epidemic has been met. I therefore have decided to raise the level of influenza pandemic alert from phase 5 to phase 6. The world is now at the start of a 2009 influenza pandemic. We're in the earliest days of the pandemic. The virus is spreading under a close and careful watch. So there you go. That was Dr. Margaret Chan, Director General of the World Health Organization, 2009. The World Health Organization, of course, and the Center for Disease Control work very closely at response. And this is actually a CDC report. Internationally, H1N1 viruses and seasonal influenza viruses are co-circulating in many parts of the world. Let's see, it goes on to say CDC recommends a yearly flu vaccination as the first and most important step in protecting against the flu. And again, the CDC is very assertive about that. In the U.S., 2010-2011 seasonal influenza vaccine will protect against H3N2 virus and influenza B virus. Now, again, for folks who are not familiar with it, we're talking about some influenza that is basically at this point in time subtyped as H1N1, which is swine flu, H5N1, which is avian flu. These are both type A viruses. These are type A virus infections. There is also presently circulating what's called an H3N2 variant. So there are a lot of antennae that are flying about these days at the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control. But again, 2009 is when we were warned against a world pandemic. World pandemic. The $64,000 question today is, why are we all still standing? Whatever happened to that world pandemic? There's an interesting piece in the Natural News that I find quite fascinating. Mike Adams penned it, and he did a fine job. The great swine flu hoax of 2009 is now falling apart at the seams as one country after another unloads hundreds of millions of doses of unused swine flu vaccines. No informed person wants the injection anymore, and the entire fear-based campaign to promote the vaccine has now been exposed as outright quackery and propaganda. Even doctors are now calling the pandemic a complete hoax. As reported on Fox News, Dr. Wolfgang Woodard, a leading health authority in Europe, says the drug companies organized a campaign of panic to put pressure on the World Health Organization to declare a pandemic. He believes it is one of the greatest medicine scandals of the country, and he's called for an inquiry. So there's a tremendous amount of money that was generated. There was $1.4 billion worth of vaccines that were circulated around the world in the first quarter of 2009 alone. 1.4 billion in the first quarter alone against a vaccine. You know, we're talking about a vaccine that did nothing. 1.4, that's a pretty good profit for something that did nothing. And that's really, I guess, the gist of what that story is about. But there's another piece we're going to talk about this evening in the news, a very new piece that just came out in July in the Canadian press. Swine flu shots may be linked to an increase in a rare neurological syndrome. And could the vaccine end up being a problem and not a solution? Hey, we're going to talk to you more about swine flu and what is the deal here with swine flu? Is it a hoax? Is it a conspiracy? Interesting, fascinating stuff in the news. Let's talk about it together. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Alrighty, welcome back. You're looking good. And we've been talking with you about an interesting, controversial topic, swine flu, hoax or conspiracy. Lots of confusion, lots of suspicions. Fun to kick it around and consider the possibilities. Hey, also, we invite you to ask questions on my Facebook page or at Twitter at Mark Mincola, or just join the conversation at Ustream, which you can find at the link to my Facebook page. So pretty easy to do, and we welcome your questions on virtually any topic. So if your questions are not on this particular topic, quite all right. We'll handle them anyway. Hey, you know, just before the break, this interesting news report that was filed in the Canadian press July 10th of this year by Helen Branswell. Interesting. Swine flu shots may be linked to increase in rare neurological syndrome, Quebec study says. The flu vaccine used during the 2009 pandemic, that's a joke, that word, pandemic, may have led to an increase in cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome in Quebec, which is a virus, of course. A new study from the province finds that, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, suggests that use of vaccine may have led to a doubling of the rate of cases of the rare neurological condition. Guillain-Barré syndrome is a progressive but generally reversible paralysis, which begins at the feet and works its way upwards. A small percentage of people who develop the condition do die. Most do make a full recovery. And for years, there have been questions about whether getting a flu shot increases one's risk of developing the condition. So, you know, what is the deal here? There's an awful lot of concern about whether or not those flu shots, actually, those swine flu shots, are even safe. And, you know, the way I look at it is how many times can we be set up only to be knocked down? I don't know if you've ever taken a peek or read any of David Ickey's books. It's spelled I-C-K-E, David Ickey. Pretty interesting theorist, but he advocates what's called problem, reaction, solution theory. And the problem, of course, is, you know, you create a problem, or at least the perception of a problem. When I say the perception of a problem, we think of things like the weapons of mass destruction. Create a problem, or at least the perception of a problem. Reaction, cause a mass reaction, panic, fear, outrage. Solution, impose a solution that supports the centralization of your power structure. So a lot of folks are not aware of the fact that that is done every day by power sources out there. And again, the A lot of folks are believing that a lot of what's going on here is a big pharma banking, business, and political power trip. These vaccines, of course, we talk often about the amount of money that were frisked, and that's really a good term because at the behest of the power influences, Big Pharma and the CDC made vaccine tax funding available via the Federal Vaccines for Children Act a number of years ago. So whether you agree with it or not, or whether you like it or not, you pay out of pocket $360 per HPV vaccine and $600 per swine flu vaccine every year. So you're paying thousands of dollars of tax money every year for vaccines that you may not agree with. They may not be safe, they may not be good for you or healthy for you, they may create all kinds of problems, they may be useless. Nonetheless, you pay for them. You sometimes pay for them in more than one way. So, it's just kind of a convoluted reality that we have to contend with. And, and also regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the fundamentals of Obamacare, the U.S. Supreme Court has now ruled that the federal government has the power to tax you into mandatory purchases of private industry products like pharmaceutical vaccines or face stiff penalties. Kind of crazy. Hey, let's grab a call here. We got Roy on the line from Rhode Island. Welcome, Roy.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Terrific. How are you?
Great. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Two things. You would be very proud of me, for one, and the staff at where my mom is, the nursing home. 2009, we stood up to the local health department, and also not because we were pressured by families, but families had said to us, we don't want our residents, with some exceptions, 95% of the families, we have to notify families when we have to inoculate. And they said no. And the health department came down on us, threatened to sue us, threatened everything. And I got up in that meeting, and boy, I stood tall, along with my administrator. And you're absolutely right. It's a big power. It was then and still is now a big power play. It's political. It's all about drug money. But yet the same group will poo-poo and everything else regarding nutritional supplements and all of that. So you're right on the money as far when it comes to this as other topics as well. What my concern is, however, is we're getting to a point now in this country, and you can't blame people and they blame the hoax that was portrayed in the 2009 swine flu thing. Yep. They don't want to inoculate their children for anything now because they don't trust. They don't trust. They think it's a big hoax, whether it's measles, anything. And I'd like you to comment on that. Where do you think we're going with this?
Well, I think, first, a couple things here. I salute you for your courage and your forthrightness about dealing with the situation at hand with your mother. So that's number one. Number two, I think that we're headed in a direction that is unfortunately further and further down a darkened path. I think that the pharmaceutical industry, again, problem, reaction, solution. Create a problem, cause a reaction, impose a solution. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what this old theorem is all about. How many times can we be set up and knocked down? To me, endlessly, unfortunately. And I think that there's not enough programs like this. When you think, Roy, about the mainstream propaganda machine out there, they rarely do their homework. And let's face it, they're in the business of supporting the big pharma, because we're talking about direct consumer advertising. You've seen the Cymbalta commercials, the Prestique, the Lyrica commercials. Those commercials, those pharmaceutical commercials alone, just the big pharma direct-to-consumer advertising on TV, those foolish commercials you see all the time on television. Yes. $4 billion a year generated with those commercials.
And don't you
There's
think
no way that mainstream...
I didn't mean to step on you. That $4 billion could be spent doing better things?
There's no question about it, but, it's a question of what it's about. I think, some folks are starting to believe that it's really all about the centralization of big pharma's banking, business, political power globally. And I, for one, am one of those people who do believe that. And I think there's a lot of people that are starting to line up in that particular line. They're just getting caught too many times with their hands in the cookie jar at this point. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're headed for more of same until people finally get fed up with it. But again, mainstream propaganda machine, the media, they're not about to they're not about to focus on nutrition or biochemistry. They're not about to focus on the empowerment of the patient to immunologically prevent disease or to support themselves. One of the things we're going to talk about in a little bit here is there's a really rich history in natural substances that have been very well researched clinically and in trial situations that have proven themselves as very safe, effective medicines in the face of all these A strain and B strain viruses. So whether we're talking about bird flu, the coronaviruses, whether we're talking about swine flu, we have had natural substances on record at the Center for Disease Control and at the World Health Organization since 1982. And nobody ever hears about them, talks about them, and you'll never hear about them because mainstream propaganda machine will never let you hear about them.
And in closing with you, they don't talk about the toxicity things they put into flu and other kinds of shots. I haven't been able to take a flu shot since '76, and I will never take them because I'm highly allergic to what they put in them.
Well, there's no question they're highly compromised. There's an investigative journalist, his name is Wayne Madsen, M-A-D-S-E-N, who's done a number of controversial reports, but he's reporting on the most recent report that he's put forth is one that talks about some combined engineering, some mutational engineering that's going on. He mentions 5 laboratories that apparently, according to, again, investigative journalist Wayne Madsen, that there are 5 laboratories that he claims have been identified by a number of different reporters as being labs that are making and manufacturing combined engineered mutated virus strains of both bird and swine flu. He claims that there's gene splicing going on of 2 human forms, 2 bird forms, and 2 swine forms. And he claims that there are 5 labs, and I'll tell you what those labs are in a little while. But, you know, when you think about this mutational business, to me, that's the most frightening part. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Roy, that they're putting some compromised materials in these vaccines. Now there are reports that there's actually mutational engineering going on.
Oh dear.
Which is another world of concern altogether.
Listen, it was good talking with you. Thank you for your observations.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So there's no question that there is a history of safe, effective ways to fight these viruses. And again, we're talking about clinical trials. Dr. D.S. Liu, L-I-U, who's from China, actually did some extensive research, and in clinical trials, he found there's a product actually that you can purchase over the counter at Good Health Natural Foods and many of the health food stores out there called Flu Stop. Flu Stop. It's a very powerful all-natural oral spray for the symptomatic relief of colds and flus. And according to Dr. Liu, has been 82.9% effective at suppressing viral symptoms within 3 days. 82.9% within 3 days. And we're talking about both influenza A and B. We're talking about bird flu. We're talking about swine flu. Those are forms of influenza A, folks. So again, here's a gentleman that he gained his notoriety a number of years ago, originally developed during the SARS epidemic. For those who remember the SARS epidemic, the severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is a coronavirus, an enveloped virus, which means, and these are all enveloped viruses, by the way, which means they're lipid encoded. It means they wrap themselves up in a shield of fat, and they weave a shield of protective fat around them so that nothing can get at them. They become very resistant that way. But the agents that we're talking about here that are natural agents that have been widely studied and recorded, their success rate has been recorded at the World Health Organization and Center for Disease Control. They've been found to be effective because of the fact that they are actually anti-enveloped medicines. They break down the lipid coating, the shield, the protective layer that these viruses weave for themselves. So once again, there are, as Roy pointed out, there are safe solutions. Of course, nobody ever hears about them because these are small companies, mom and pop corporations that produce a natural product. They're not about to earn their way into the spotlight of mainstream media. There's no question that they can't match the advertising dollars that Big Pharma can throw out there. So again, folks might want to take a look at Flu Stop, F-L-U-S-T-O-P. That's the trademark on it. And it's nothing more than a group of herbs that have been put together. It's part of an old Chinese medicine formula that has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And Dr. D.S. Liu, who was, again, the medical physician who was in charge of the worldwide SARS epidemic by the World Health Organization back in the 1980s, developed Flu Stop, which is, again, a Chinese herbal synergist, and in clinical trials proven 82.9% viral symptom suppression, success rate within 3 days. And that's for influenza A, influenza B. So that's just one solution. And we've got another solution, too, that we're going to talk about in a minute or two here that I've talked about on the program before. And something that's been studied at the Respiratory Virology branch at the Center for Disease Control as far back as 1982. So a natural medicine that is widely used nowadays around the country because the word is spreading. I know that I've recommended it at all the different corporate consulting programs I've been involved with, and certainly with the thousands of patients that I've worked with over the years. And I've talked about it for a number of years on the radio and television and whatnot. So Dr. John Kabara, K-A-B-A-R-A, a very fine gentleman. He at one time was the head of the science department at the Michigan State University out at East Lansing, Michigan. And he was given a grant in 1982 at the Center for Disease Control to do some virology research. And he studied monolaurin, which is nothing more than the lauric acid from coconut oil, a food-grade medicine from coconut oil. And he found that it was proven effective against all DNA and RNA viruses, including all A and B subtypes, which, by the way, includes exactly what we're talking about, swine flu and bird flu. Therefore, translation, folks, we have had on record at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta an effective, safe, side effect-free, food-grade medicine from coconuts that kills swine flu and bird flu. He found also, and he proved in his research at the Respiratory Virology branch at the CDC back in '82, also proved that it was effective against HIV 1 and 6, Visna virus, measles, rubella, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, Semliki forest virus, HPV, human papillomavirus. We talked about that last week. Also, it has antibacterial properties against all strep. It has antifungal and antiprotozoal properties. Again, and it's also effective against staph as well. So we're talking about a very powerful antibacterial, antiviral agent, food grade, no side effects. And again, researched as far back as 1982 at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta by Dr. John Kabara. I asked him to come on my show years ago, and he refused for one reason. He was afraid of coming on the program. He was afraid of having this kind of conversation. That is a true fact. I had about an hour conversation with him. He's a fine, fine gentleman. And he said, with all due respect, I don't feel comfortable talking about it. There's a lot of pressure on me. And he just didn't feel comfortable getting into the conversation. So that tells you a little bit about the nature and the tenure of this kind of topic. And it's unfortunate that he wouldn't come on. But nonetheless, it's not going to stop us from talking about it. And again, the other product we talked about is Flu Stop. So monolaurin and Flu Stop, both proven effective against these particular dastardly viruses. And monolaurin, of course, is readily available at health food stores out there around the country. Good Health Natural Foods, of course, has plenty of monolaurin and lauricidin, Lauricidin, lauricidin. Lauricidin is the specific product that Dr. Kabara developed on his own years after his research. And Ecological Formulas makes the monolaurin. So you can actually purchase either one. The monolaurin is a 600 milligram capsule, and the lauricidin are in caplets, little pellets that can be taken quite safely and quite easily. So either one works fine. Also, Flu Stop is a spray, and once again, readily available at the health food store. And that was developed by Dr. D.S. Liu, and he is a really noted researcher. And he is the gentleman who's done 40-plus years of study and research in the field of molecular biology and viruses. And so anyway, we've got natural products, again, side effect free. But what is the story here? The story here is the swine flu, hoax or conspiracy, or both, I guess. And I would urge folks to take a look at the Wayne Madsen interview. It's a YouTube interview. If you want to search it, you can go to Alex Jones. Alex Jones, of course, has a very controversial radio program around the country. And if you do an Alex Jones search and just look for swine flu engineered, and you'll find it at Infowars.com. But he talks about 5 laboratories where he has documented evidence that the swine flu and bird flu have been spliced and genetically mutated, and it's quite an incredible story. Hey, we're going to talk more about it. Swine flu, hoax or conspiracy. When we come back, stay right where you are. Hey, welcome back. Folks want to pick up any more of this kind of information, you certainly are welcome to check out the website. It's www.maxhealing.com. One word, Max Healing. Easy enough. So check it out, and you can browse through. There's a lot of information, a lot of media stuff on there that I've got on there, so you might take a little look through and enjoy it. I invite you to do so. Hey, before that last break, we wanted to go over with you some interesting information from Wayne Madsen, M-A-D-S-E-N, investigative journalist, who is reporting the swine and avian combined engineering, deliberately designed to resist vaccines, gene-spliced mutations from 2 strains of human flu, 2 strains of swine, and actually 1 strain of avian flu, immune to vaccine. And again, he claims that there are researchers, noted researchers in Germany, noted researchers in Brazil, who have examined these strains and claim that they are indeed toyed with, that they are indeed gene-spliced mutational forms. And cases now have been reported in Africa, Cape Verde, Samoa, New Guinea, South Africa. So there are a number of different cases that have been reported around the world and that are being tracked as we speak. What is going on? This is absolute madness. But anyway, Wayne Madsen, M-A-D-S-E-N, goes on to say that there are 5 labs that have been identified as labs, according to Madsen, that are indeed responsible for the gene splicing of these mutated forms of virus. I'll tell you what they are. Number 1 is the Biosafety Level 4 lab in Madison, Wisconsin, at the University of Wisconsin. Number 2 is the Armed Forces Pathology Institute, Rockville, Maryland. Number 3, the U.S. Army Infectious Disease Lab at Fort Detrick. Number 4 is the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. Number 5 is the National Macrobiology Lab in Winnipeg, Canada. So there you go. And if you want to find out more about that on your own, just again, you can check out, go to Infowars.com and just do a search for swine flu engineered. You'll pick right up on it. So that's, again, Wayne Madsen, M-A-D-S-E-N. It's a very short interview. It's well worth a peek at, and it's pretty remarkable. That's all I can tell you. So when we talk about the swine flu hoax or conspiracy, there's all kinds of information floating around out there. I've never seen such a hot button in my life. And again, it's constant and it's active too, because we're starting to get this bump again. I know people are thinking back to 2009 when this was really hot stuff. It's heating up again. They don't quit. As you said earlier, that the CDC just reported this month, August 10th, 2012, that indeed the rate has jumped. The rate of infection from swine flu has jumped from an average of 24 cases to up to 224 per month. I mean, that's incredible. There are 9 states reporting incidences. So, again, this is the news that this won't go away. It won't quit. And it's like a flashback to 2009. And yet, what did happen in 2009? And the answer is not much of anything. And that's the really important part of this equation, is that the swine flu in 2009 that was identified as a level 6. I read it to you earlier. It was identified by the Center for Disease Control as a level 6 virus. And that's pretty serious pandemic stuff. Level 6 is as high as it goes. And yet, the 2009 swine flu was never dangerous. It never should have been escalated to a level 6 pandemic in the first place. All a big marketing scam whose purpose was simply to, in the opinion of many, sell vaccines. And the worst of it is the CDC and the WHO were in on the whole process. So as it worked out, Big Pharma, of course, made billions of dollars. And as I said earlier, in the first quarter of 2009, GlaxoSmithKline shipped $1.4 billion worth of vaccines. That's just one quarter of 2009. So what is going on here? Again, I always point to, the David Icke problem, reaction, solution theory. That seems to be what's going on here. Again, the idea that you can create a problem, or at least the perception of a problem. Again, he talks about the weapons of mass destruction being a classic example of creating the perception of a problem, because that's all you have to do is create the perception. And then you create a reaction, a mass reaction of panic or fear or outrage. Once we're in the panic, fear, outrage mode, we can be had, folks, because then they can impose a solution that supports the pitch, I guess I'd say, that supports the centralization of their power structure. And, and the media doesn't help anything at all, as we've said many times tonight. So, newsflash, Big Pharma and the government and media are all in the rack together, folks. There's a newsflash. Film at 11. Anyway, regardless of all that stuff, what are we going to do? We talked last week about the fact that you and I are paying for the HPV vaccine, the human papilloma vaccine, and we're paying for the swine flu vaccine as well, in spite of the fact, as we mentioned last week, that the human papilloma virus, according to the FDA, there is 3,589 harmful reactions that have been recorded from May 2009 to September 2010. 213 represent permanent disabilities, yet you're paying for it. I don't know. I don't remember anybody asking me if I felt like paying for something like that, but I think if I was given a chance or a choice, I might have vetoed that. So you're paying $600 per swine flu vaccine every year out of your pocket, and $360 for an HPV vaccine. And again, regardless of whether it's the best decision for our health or for your health or your families, the government has handed over economic monopoly to the big pharma and their vaccines, and that's really the bottom line. So, it's really also, as Roy said earlier in our earlier call tonight, a matter of trying to get the message out there that there are alternatives. There are better ways to go about doing this. And we talked about the importance of maintaining natural, safe immunity. And I don't know how you could do much better than monolaurin, or how you could do much better than flu stop. Monolaurin, again, has proven effective at the Center for Disease Control against all RNA and DNA viruses, including all A and B subtypes. And that's really what we're talking about here. So we're talking about a food-grade substance that virtually has no side effects and is safe and proven effective. And yet, very few folks know about it. More people know about it than ever before, so that's a good thing. But, more and more folks are starting to learn, but not enough know about it. So could these vaccines be creating more problems or more than solutions? And again, I think that's the question number one. Question number two here is, could these vaccines be a complete setup? Is it that these vaccines are not working on purpose? From the conspiratorial perspective, as Madsen says, is this more a matter of well, they're just trying to sell more vaccines? If we can create a scenario where we frighten the daylights out of the world and then provide them with vaccines that don't work, we can, because they're mutated strains, and then we can continue to develop new vaccines, we can go on the permanent vaccine merry-go-round here. We can just kind of continue to spend the rest of our lives developing a more effective vaccine, on and on and on. And there's a pretty expensive gravy train that follows up with that whole process. So, again, I think there's a huge question that falls upon the ears and the choices of the common human being out there, the regular folks that have to decide whether or not they want to go along with this, whether or not they're up in arms about it, and what exactly they can do about it. I think number one, you basically want to protect yourself and your family with natural solutions here. That's why I say that monolaurin should be in everybody's Lazy Susan out there, everybody's counters, and to make sure that you understand how to use monolaurin. Those are 600 milligram capsules during any kind of flu season or during any kind of flu episodes. And again, you tend to think about flu season as being what? November, December, January, February, March. Now the flu rate is going up drastically, and it's the middle of summer. It's crazy. So it can easily be believed by this one person here that you're listening to tonight that this stuff has been toyed with, manipulated, and I don't trust any of it. So the key really here is that I got plenty of monolaurin on hand, and I'm not shy about using it either. And the way to use it to keep yourself antiviral or virally safe would be to use 600 milligram capsules. Don't buy the 300 milligram because in my opinion they're not strong enough. And again, the monolaurin comes in 300s and 600s. Get the 6s. I'd recommend for adults that are starting to get that sniffle and that cold and that flu business. And again, you don't have to worry about if it's a virus or bacteria because monolaurin is proven effective against both bacterias, viruses, and as well against protozoa, fungus, etc. So it's pretty effective as an immune agent. So I'd recommend 2 of those with an adult 3 times a day, 2 at breakfast, 2 at lunch, 2 at dinner, in the midst of an acute attack anyway. For prevention, I'd say just 2 a day. Great way to go, just 2 a day. Kids, you want to cut those doses down. If kids can not swallow the capsules, you probably want to go with the loracidin. The loracidin, as I said earlier, is the same thing. Of course, Dr. Kabara says it's more effective because of the way it was manufactured. But anyway, they're easier to dispense of with a child in mind who can't swallow a capsule. Little tiny pellets, you could just give the child 2 pellets and down the hatch. Pretty easy with 2 small pellets in a glass of water. And you might do that twice a day in the middle of a cold or flu and just 1 a day just to prevent during the school year because you know what happens once the kids are off to school, then they're spreading all kinds of fun things and they come home with them and it's fun and games. So to prevent those problems, I recommend you keep plenty of loracidin and monolaurin on hand. The Flu Stop is a spray, and it's a little bit easier for an adult to take. It's got kind of it's an herbal synergist, as I pointed out. So the Flu Stop spray is a little bit pungent, which means it's a little rough tasting for kids. It's too bad because the spray makes it easily dispensable to kids. The flavor, unfortunately, is something that probably compromises its effectiveness with kids. But here's what I would recommend. I'd recommend that you do the loracidin pellets for the kids. One other thing that's been studied extensively, sambucal, S-A-M-B-U-C-A-L, S-A-M as in Mark, B-U-C-A-L. Sambucal is elderberry extract, and elderberry is a remarkable natural medicine that has very high concentrations of bioflavonoids, and it's very, very effective against virus. Again, similar to the clinical trials that have been done, reports from the University of Maryland and Penn State University show that the sambucal significantly lowers the symptomatology associated and the suppression of those symptoms at a success rate that's pretty dramatic. So the elderberry extract is a great way to go with kids, and it's a sweet, syrupy kind of thing. It's kind of like a cough syrup, but it tastes great. Got a honey flavor to it with the berries. That is what I recommend for the kids in the face of this flu business, or like I said earlier, just 1 or 2 pellets of the loracidin. The adults take the monolaurin and the Flu Stop spray, and you'll never have any problems. But school's right around the corner, and the sniffing is you can almost hear it in the distance. And this is probably a good time to get yourself set up. And it feels like we're being set up, and it feels like this could be a rough ride. So I want to make sure everybody's ready for action. And it's really important that you understand that there are some folks out there who believe that there could indeed be risks associated with the vaccine. Again, I bring up the Quebec study that I mentioned earlier in an article in the Canadian Press, July 10th of this year, from Helen Branswell. Swine flu shots may be linked to an increase in rare neurological syndrome in the Quebec study. The flu vaccine used during the 2009 pandemic may have led to an increase in cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome in Quebec. A new study from the province suggests. The study published Wednesday in the Journal of the American Medical Association suggests that use of the vaccine may have led to a doubling of the rate of cases of a rare neurological condition, Guillain-Barré syndrome is a progressive but generally reversible paralysis. I like that. Generally reversible paralysis. That's reassuring, which begins at the feet and works its way upwards. A small percentage of people who develop the condition do die. Most make a full recovery. Again, reassuring. But for years, there have been questions about whether getting a shot, the flu shot, increases one's risk of developing this particular condition. There have been many studies, and this most recent Quebec study is not very positive, not very reassuring. Again, it suggests that there was a doubling of the rate of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a virus in itself, based on the exposure to the flu vaccine from the swine flu shot. So be on guard here. Do your homework. Do your research, as I always suggest. Make sure you are in the clear and comfortable and confident about what you've learned. Don't just get on board and follow the train out there, because that train could be headed downhill in a hurry. So, all right. Hey, we're going to take a short little break. We're going to pay a few light bills. We'll be right on back. Stay tuned. All righty, welcome back. We got a couple questions. We got some calls we're going to get to here. Let's get to this call first. Jeanette from Hanson, welcome. You're on the Natural Health Show.
Hello, Mark. I think I've called before about the same subject, but I couldn't help but call again and remind people that a few years ago, my uncle was 54 years old. Mm-hmm. He was a big, strong, strapping, healthy man, never sick a day in his life, never missed one day of work. He was solid muscle and just naturally. And he died from Guillain-Barré syndrome, from the swine flu shot. It was mandatory at the time that they had to take the shot at where he worked.
I'm so very sorry for you, and it's unfortunate, and it's a really sad story, and I think that part of the real important connection to this story is that the choice that Americans, the libertarian choice to decide for themselves is slowly being taken away from them, and that is perhaps one of the more disturbing components of this whole thing. I'm so sorry that happened, but you know.
I'm wondering if there are any companies out there today that make the flu vaccine mandatory.
Well, you know, if you think about, we talked last week about HPV virus and about how, like, the state of California just recently had a vote, and they voted mandatory HPV vaccines without having to consult with parents. So there were kids that were coming home from school with brochures who received the shot without ever consulting with mom or dad. I mean, that's the direction we're headed in. See,
yeah.
And I think that this power push. The only thing I can tell you here is, again, we're dealing with a power push, and that's the bottom line. And I believe it's really all about the centralization of Big Pharma's power here. And Big Pharma and government, like I said, they're kissing cousins right now, whether they want to hear that or not. And I think you got to really read in between the lines to know where this thing is headed. And unfortunately, it still comes down to us being pinched out of our choice. And
well,
that's
this is it. You know, and I didn't find out what it was that caused his illness until it was too late. And when I worked at Good Health, was when I picked up a book, and it was written from Germany, and I saw it written there. And I consulted. I had a full team of attorneys that were looking into this.
Yeah.
I had doctors, from Boston, and they were all, nobody knew. Nobody would give me an answer as to why he had this. As I say, he was a strong, healthy man. He was never sick a day.
Just terrible.
He didn't have high blood pressure. He didn't have heart. He didn't have cancer. He didn't have anything.
Well, and moreover, Jeanette, he had a strong immune system because the man took good care of himself, obviously, and he didn't need to be told what to do in this regard. He already took care of himself.
Exactly. I mean, he would take his lunch to work, but his lunch would be chicken, fresh cooked chicken, vegetables, everything that my grandmother would cook, he would take for his lunch.
Well, and as you say, he was
sad because he didn't even eat fast food.
Yeah, no, he was uncompromised because of the care that he took for his health, and obviously
right.
That's a really sad situation because struck down unnecessarily, in my opinion.
Well, murdered at work was basically what happened, because he had told me that there were others at work that had the same thing. And come to find out, it was from the shot that they had to take.
Here's one other component to it, too, that really is very powerful. There's something called serial passaging, and genetic drifting. So that means that there's protein in these vaccines, from the viruses that are in them,
right,
that can mutate at any point in time down the line. So how about the vaccine you get today? What's going to happen with that vaccine? How's it going to mutate in a year, 2 years, or 10 years? And what
this was it.
And what might it cause? And there'll be no smoking gun.
Right. Well, it was probably a good 5 years after he had the shot that he came down with this.
Yeah, that's terrible. It's really terrible. I'm so sorry for your loss. And
it was terrible. It really was. It was just so needless.
Well, and hopefully programs such as this and testimonials such as yours will help make a difference.
I'm just hoping that people will listen and they will go to their place of work and be sure that they don't have to have this shot in order to work there.
Well, at least we hope and suggest that people really pay close attention to these issues, do their research, do their due diligence, and don't just cave in so easily.
Right, and pass the word along.
Jeanette, thank you so much for your contribution. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark, for everything you do.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
All right, and we've also got a question from Facebook. Georgianne Foley wrote us a question. Why don't we have labels on our foods that are engineered? And the answer to that is the same reason that the pharmaceutical industry is getting away with what we're talking about tonight, because it's really hard to have the power to match the power of the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And unfortunately, they've got tremendous lobbying muscle. And they pretty much can protect themselves, can establish policy, can really influence policy. And until you and I really develop a stronger response, and until you and I can develop a stronger lobby as voting public, unfortunately, it's not going to change. But there's a lot of pressure that certain groups, I know a lot of holistic groups are now putting pressure on the food industry to have the engineered foods labeled. They should be labeled. I'll tell you a quick story about that. There are many folks who have anaphylactic reactions to things like nuts, peanuts, obviously. And that's a very serious condition. So when you take foods that are engineered, they splice foods. You could actually buy rice, like brown rice, for example, and have it spliced with the nutty flavor of some kind of nuts. The genetic splicing from nuts in that rice, unlabeled, could really pose a dramatic threat to someone. So that's just an example of what we're up against. And who in the ER would ever know what that person was reacting to? No one would ever know. So it really, in my opinion, is a travesty that there's no labeling. Engineered foods, which unfortunately, again, are growing in numbers in this country, absolutely have to be labeled for the safety and well-being of the American public. So that's just another show for another night. Maybe we'll do that one very soon. But it's a great question, and again, hopefully soon labeling will take place. I think that sort of paints a picture here that we, the voter public, the common person in this country, is really getting the shaft. There's an awful lot of pressure that's on us to try to protect ourselves. It's hard enough for us to earn a living. It's hard enough for us to keep those mortgages paid, especially nowadays. And it's just outrageous that we have to keep up with this kind of manipulation. But we do. Unfortunately, it's going to take place with or without our consent. So we got to be, as I always say at the end of this program, be wise, be aware, be well. I say that for a reason. And certainly tonight's broadcast points out why. All right, we want to make sure we say hello to everybody out there in Radio Land and thank the folks for listening. We also want to thank Tim McKinney for doing a great job as the producer of this broadcast. And also, we want to thank Michelle Riley for doing such a great internship job all summer long. So she's headed back to Syracuse University, and we're going to miss her. Did a great job. Also, folks, again, I invite you to go to the website, and that's maxhealing.com. There's plenty of information on there. And maxhealing.com has oodles of film and video, I should say, and there actually is a documentary film on there and a lot of other goodies as well. So you can check that out and hopefully learn something that you didn't know. And hopefully it's an enlightening connection that you make with our website at maxhealing.com. I also want to thank Ed Perry, of course, for keeping this forum happening, and remind you that problem, reaction, solution is running roughshod over the country right now. So don't let yourself get set up. Make sure you do your research, do your homework, be an active voice in these really important decisions. And as far as just caving in and for these vaccines, don't give in. Make sure you give yourself plenty of educated solutionizing, and make sure you do your homework again. Hey, until next Sunday, this is Mark Mincola. Please be wise, be aware, be well, make it a healthy week. Good night. Thanks for listening.